welcome. Welcome those watching again on the recording. This is the Women, Wellbeing and Leadership webinar run by the Network of Wellbeing. We're really excited about having this discussion. We decided to do a webinar on this topic because we observe that leadership is a really kind of changing issue at the moment, that what makes a good leader is kind of in such rapidly changing times kind of open for debate more than it has been previously. And also, obviously at the Network of Wellbeing, we see wellbeing as a kind of key issue that we want to see brought more prominently forward in society. And we've observed that, sometimes it can be some strong female leaders have brought that forward, not only female leaders, of course, but we wanted to kind of open a discussion about what are the connections between these areas of women, wellbeing and leadership, what qualities of leadership can be brought in, how can wellbeing be made a part of that. So that's just a bit of the framing of the discussion we're going to have this evening. We've got three speakers that are going to present around this topic: Michelle Preston, Georgina Wilson and Indra Adnan. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker for this evening, which is Michelle Preston. So Michelle is a positive psychologist, a change agent and a leader who is committed to the well-being of people and planet. She's the founder of Simply Happy and Simply Women on Purpose, SWAP, and she's also incredibly proud to be a trustee of NOW, and we're very happy to have her as a trustee of Network of Wellbeing now. So I'll hand over to you, Michelle, to start us off.
Thanks, Flo. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here with Network Wellbeing again. Like Flo said, I'm a trustee and incredibly honoured to be a trustee. So my job is to kickstart us thinking about leadership, but from the inner world of the leader. And the work that I do as a positive psychologist and with Simply Women on Purpose is all around helping individuals and women in particular to identify their inner core values, align them to the outer working world, to find and follow a path with heart and be the change that we want to see in the world. And this is a kind of mantra that I got used to saying over and over when I went back to school and did a postgrad 4 or 5 years ago. I went to study positive psychology accidentally because I was actually seeking something that would enable me as a leader to connect with other like-minded leaders. And I couldn't find it. And nature abhors a vacuum, so if you can't find it, create it. That's just years of working in the voluntary sector. So when like Flo said, the whole model of leadership is changing. And when I decided to follow a leadership path and to start investigating what models of leadership were out there, little did I know that this year would be the year where models of excellent leadership and models of appalling leadership will be brought to the forefront. And that COVID has really acted as a lens and enabled us to really magnify what's been there the whole time. If we look around the world and we look at the countries where they have strong leadership, and I'll define my understanding of strong and strength in a moment, you'll see that the response to COVID and crisis has been very different. I'm also part of the CLAW social leadership programme for leaders in the women and girls sector. And something that we're exploring in that are various models of leadership. And one of those models is feminist leadership. And what I want to just give you is a definition of feminist leadership, because to me it really demonstrates and embodies what is just good leadership in action, yeah? So there's lots of definitions, but this one I think is pretty good. But broadly, it's the explicit redistribution of power and responsibility in a way that is inclusive, participatory, and mindful of issues of gender, race, social class, sexual orientation, and ability. Feminist leadership is about establishing cooperation instead of competition, and building on the ideas and skills of the whole group rather than the leadership of one or two powerful individuals. For me, it doesn't necessarily mean feminist leadership, it just means good leadership, yeah? But if we have that at the heart of what we do, it helps us to really tune into what's of value to us, what's important to us. And when we think about values and strengths, which we do in positive psychology, Yeah, that's at the very heart of what our inner world is. So the work that I do is around helping individuals to identify and connect with the values and the strengths that they have. There are 24 strengths in positive psychology. There are 6 virtues that they're underneath, and I'll share with Flo a link so you can look at this, and you can do your own via strengths. You can start to look at what your strengths are, what your values are, and how you can incorporate them into the work that you do. So this inner world is really important. And the inner world is, sorry, I'm reading the chat. Somebody's asked about summarising feminist leadership. We put that definition in the chat box for everybody. This inner world has to be the starting point for us as good leaders, yeah? If we don't start with ourselves, if we don't connect with what's of value and what's important to us, we can't then ripple that out into our families, our communities, our society, and the wider world. And that's what the other 2 speakers are going to be talking to you about. And you'll see that all these threads weave together. There's lots of different ways that we can work and start to identify what's important to us. But I think the most fundamental thing is around our own well-being.
Sorry, 1 minute.
Yeah, I see you, Flo. And what, as a starting point, I would encourage you to think about how you support your own well-being, whether you place the well-being of yourself above the well-being of others, and how you can integrate those 2 things. We're going to 5 minutes. It's like I just start to get warmed up, and you know, I'm going to share lots of resources via the chat and via the follow-up email. Yeah, but just to start you off with this focus that the inner influences the outer. We have to have a direct connection and a correlation between our inner values and our outer values in the work we do. If we don't, we have a disparity. And I just have to say before I go, we must not separate the personal from the professional. Yeah, we are what we do. If we separate our personal from our professional, then we're not fully engaged, we're not fully present in the work that we do. I'm going to stop on time for once and hand back over to Flo.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you everyone for already engaging in the chat. And if you're feeling that that's, yeah, we'd love to hear more from Michelle. Of course, we want to hear more from all our speakers. We decided this evening to hear really short, sharp presentations from each of the speakers so that actually the speakers can have a discussion with each other. So we will be hearing more from Michelle in discussion with our other 2 speakers, Georgina and Indra, shortly. But in the meantime, yeah, welcome you, Michelle, if you'd like to put things in the chat box. And of course, like Michelle mentions, we'll be sending a follow-up email with lots of resources included as well in terms of the definitions. But yeah, really resonant points about the connections between inner and outer and professional and personal. Thank you so much for sharing to start the discussion off. So I'm going to introduce our second speaker of this evening, which is Georgina Wilson. So Georgina founded BUD in 2014, supporting leaders for positive change in business and community. Georgina is devoted to facilitating real change and uses innovative, outside-of-the-box approaches in her programs, ensuring that they're really accessible for all. So yeah, Georgina is really focused on leadership in her work at BUD, and we're really excited to have her here with us this evening. I'll hand over to you, Georgina.
Thank you so much, Flo. And yeah, great start, Michelle. I think it just kind of, as we had our kind of session, our planning session, we just realized how connected all of the things are, which is great. And so, yeah, as Flo mentioned, my name's Georgina, and I founded BUD to support leaders for positive change. And what has been happening recently is that we've begun to put all of the things together and look at our model of inclusive leadership. And I'm going to share a couple of slides with you. I don't normally do slides, but I thought it'd be easier seeing as we have a short amount of time. But just for us to kind of put things into a little bit of context around this model that we've created that encompasses all of those elements around inclusive leadership. So I'm going to share that with you right now, nice and short and sharp. So I hope everyone can see that. So yeah, so ROC model for inclusive leadership. Now, I'm just going to give you some really quick stats just to show you how more productive organizations are when they have more gender diversity and also ethnic diversity. So it's in there, you know, I don't need to go through every single element. This is a report done by McKinsey, and it just shows that, you know, the more diverse we are, the better we are. And our model for ROC inclusive leadership has these 3 elements. The first one is release, and that's really about releasing control. I think, you know, as Michelle mentioned, there's this idea that you have to be the strong, tough leader that has control, and we're just like, no. And in fact, in my own organization, I was having a conversation today, and I was just saying, you know, we're working with about 18 people, and I'm constantly saying, look, I have no clue here. You guys are excellent at what you do. Bring something forward. Let's make sure that, you know, we're able to arrive where we need to. And I don't really care how we get there, but let's all get stuck in. And you just kind of let go of that control, and so much comes out of it. And then you've got the O, which is the ownership. And Michelle's already mentioned this as well, which is really, you know, taking ownership of what's important to us. Who are we? Where do we come from? What are our dreams, our passions, our desires? But also, what are some of our struggles? You know, it's absolutely fine, and it's okay for us to recognize those things and to ask for help, and to look at our own unconscious bias in our inclusive leadership, and just say, you know, this is what's happening kind of behind the scenes, and I've acknowledged that right now, and then maybe I want to do something about it, and that's okay. And then we have the collective intelligence, which is really, look, every single person here is important and has something of value to offer. And we just want to uncover what that is and bring it to the table so we can make the most beautiful soup. You know, that's kind of what I call it. It's just that, you know, sometimes we're trying to own something on our own, but we don't have everything that's available, that needs to be available for us to create something that could be really amazing. And so with these kind of 3 elements, it brings inclusive leadership. And I'm going to stop sharing just because I'd like to really just share a very quick story that happened today. And I was having a conversation again about doing another presentation with some other women. And, you know, the question was, you know, what is it that, you know, what is it that makes women really special in leadership? And could you give an example of like an organization that you've worked with that really offers this? And I was like, yeah, we do lots of work with organizations, but And then I was like, well, we do it. We do this in Bud. And actually we allow people to be human. You know, we say, look, we know that you're amazing, we know that you're great, we're going to uncover those things, but come as you know, come as a person, as a human. And we recognize that we all have different things going on, and we accept that. We don't require you to be this kind of specific role, but we require you to be a human being first, and that's okay. And we're interested in finding out more about you as a person, so that we can relate, we can connect, and actually we can just be a family together and also do some great work. And so we just have lots and lots of fun doing that, but it just involves, again, letting go, taking ownership, and bringing that collective intelligence. So thanks, Flo. I think I'm just about on time.
Perfect timing. Even a few seconds to spare. Thank you so much, Georgina. And yeah, thank you for so much inspiration from you and Michelle so far. Really, really exciting to hear about the work that you're doing and how you're modeling some of these lessons in your own organization. So again, feel free to write comments or questions in the chat for our speakers, which we'll come to later. I see people writing thank you for your presentation. And I'm going to introduce our final speaker for this evening, who is Indra Adnan. So Indra is the co-initiator of the Alternative UK, a political platform that asks the question, if politics is broken, what is the alternative? And she is concurrently a psychosocial therapist, a writer, and the founder of the Soft Power Network. So really excited also to welcome Indra to the discussion this evening. Hand over to you, Indra.
So thanks very much indeed. And thanks very much for the 2 previous speakers. You've really fired my imagination and made me think about my own leadership. Whereas where we focus in the alternative is very much in the public space. And we started the alternative, the day that I decided that we needed to have the alternative was the day that Jo Cox was murdered. And I came to this really stark conclusion, which I'd been thinking about for about 10 years, that the way that we do our politics is so divisive. and in a way it's very destructive, that we need a genuine alternative. So the first questions that I began to ask with my colleagues when we started this platform was, what is it that we feel are the problems at the heart of our current politics? And the first thing that we came to the conclusion was that the idea of what is a human being right at the heart of our politics was very inadequate. So we think of a human being in our current politics as a material entity, you know, Homo economicus, the thing that really cares about money and mostly a roof over our head, which of course are very important things. But if you consider what a human being is, the way that both Georgina and Michelle were beginning to describe, it's a very complex entity. You know, it's what we call a biopsychosocial spiritual entity that has very complex needs. And therefore we need to design politics around this idea of what a human being is, very differently from the way that we have designed our politics till now, which is mostly around the economy and material needs. So the other thing that we felt was that the qualities of leadership that we need to bring this out into the public space are already there. You know, there are many, many women leaders who are, for example, running civil society organizations or holding communities together that are not seen in the world of politics. When women go into politics, they're often pressured to be the same kind of leaders as the men, and nothing really changes. Whereas in the world of the community, we see women holding these complex lives of people together in ways that really, you know, their survival depends upon it. So one of the main things that we do is to try to bring the innate qualities and the workings, if you like, the leadership of women from communities into the public space. That's the number one thing. And then when we're in the public space, how do we hold that public space is another big important question. So if you think about the political meetings that you might have been to in the past, where there are just people speaking from the front and you're sitting in rows and you only get a chance to ask a question or here or there after the leader has spoken, what we're doing is really transforming the space of politics, making it very interactive, making it experience-led and storytelling-led. We feel that if people want to share their own desires and their wishes and begin to develop their own agency within politics, this isn't a theory and this isn't strategy. This is the stories of people's lives that we need to bring into the space. So women, without question, are doing this naturally, and they do it purposefully as well. And it's an ideal new ground for politics. So that really is the two things I've spoken about, and I'm going to come to an end pretty soon, add up to what we would call soft power. You know, we need more soft power in politics. If hard power is basically the power of money and guns, which is the way that we have run the show until now, soft power is more to do with the power of relationship and the power of trust to be able to give the right conditions for our democracy to grow. So that's really the story, if you like, of the alternative. We need more women in politics, but we need women to come as women, not to come as, just better versions or other versions of what we have now.
Thank you so much, Indra. Again, a really inspiring and thought-provoking presentation. And I would like to, I know it can feel strange to present on Zoom in the sense that we're all engrossed in what all three of you have been saying, but we can't immediately share our appreciation, but there is actually a little reactions button at the bottom of Zoom. So if you want to give a round of applause or a thumbs up or a heart for the speakers, or just show your appreciation in whichever way feels right to you, that's always much appreciated. Because everything that you've shared, Michelle, Georgina and Indra, is really important, and actually so interesting that we at the Network of Wellbeing thought of the three of you as really complementary speakers, in the sense of your work somewhat being, Michelle's being on positive psychology, and about kind of our inner values, and then Georgina working with organisations, and Indra working at the political level and looking at those different dimensions. But actually, we recognised in preparing for this event that there's so much crossover. You know, that actually part of what you've all been saying is that inclusivity is essential to leadership, and that's what's kind of central to the work that you're all doing, you know, in slightly different ways, but like I say, with so much crossover. So now what we really want to do is just have a kind of conversation between the three of you about the work that you're doing, some of the kind of ideas that you've shared. So I'm just going to start that off by asking a few questions, and I'll invite you guys to kind of come in, whoever would like to, whoever would like to on the questions, and kind of connect with each other on what's being asked. And feel free to go beyond the questions and reflect on what each other have said as well. But my first question is, what types of leaders or leadership do you think really supports well-being? So yeah, have you seen particular, you've touched on it in all of your presentations, but do you see that there's a certain type of leader or leadership? And again, feel free to reflect on what each other has said. Georgina, would you like to come in first? You're looking very thoughtful.
Yes, always very thoughtful. I don't know if this is a terminology, it probably is because there's so many of them, but I would say an authentic leader is what I would class as a leader that's really focused on their well-being. And I've had several situations, even with, you know, people that we're working with that say, oh my gosh, I can't, you know, they'll explain that something has happened, and I'll be like, okay, that's absolutely fine, yeah, thanks so much for sharing it with me, that's great. And they're like, oh gosh, you know, I would never, you know, share such a thing with, you know, in a different sort of work setting and that sort of thing. And it's like, well why not? Why are we not allowed to share what's real and what's true to us? And why are we not allowed to ask for help or say, actually, I need to switch off at the moment because for my own well-being I need to do X, Y, Z, or what do we need to include to ensure that we can arrive together feeling at our best selves? You know, so I think just being authentic and true is key.
Thanks so much, Georgina. Really important. Michelle, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I think that's so important and so valid what you've said, Georgina. You know, it's I'm doing lots of work at the moment around meaningful leadership, yeah, and meaningful leadership is about exploring that inner world of the leader, that, you know, that what I talked about earlier, that inner and that outer. There has to be that deep connection, that deep resonance, otherwise you have this disparity. So I think that, and without that inner outer match, you can't have that level of authenticity, because there's always going to be this sense of disconnect. And if we have the sense of disconnect, we can't be fully present and engaged in the work that we do. And if we're not doing that, then we're just turning up for work, when actually, I know that the people that I've worked with and for over the last 25 years in voluntary community and social enterprise sector, yeah, it's not just about getting up and going to work. It certainly wasn't for me when I made a decision way back to move into this world of social change here, because it was about actually getting up and being part of something that was greater than me. Yeah, and I think that's, and the work that I do is predominantly around purpose and meaning. So what we're talking about with these models of leadership, and I think what we've seen in these models of leadership recently in relation to COVID, is about the leaders that have responded in the most authentic way have been authentic leaders, yeah? Where leadership to them isn't about controlling, it's about collaborating. It's not about being in charge, it's about tapping into that infinite wisdom, that hive mentality, yeah, which is something that Indra mentioned earlier. You know, when you were speaking, I was writing down lots of different words and saying, you know, it's not about somebody standing up and telling us what we need to do. It's about a good leader will tap into the stories that people bring, the life experiences, the lived experience, and then work with the collective to come up with solutions where everybody has a part to play. And I think that's the authentic leadership. And I think that's some of what we're seeing at the moment is around that deep level of authenticity and that deep desire to follow that path of service, because it's, you know, we are in this together. But if you look at the models of leadership where people are, and we're having it now with COVID fatigue and people kicking back against, you know, restrictions, and that's because they're being told what to do, and there's little value placed on the input that they have in the part that they have to play. So I think that's so crucial to what is a good leader now.
Yeah, thanks so much, Michelle. And Indra, would you like to come on?
Yeah, I mean, I think both the points that Georgina and Michelle brought up are absolutely crucial. I mean, authenticity and the ability to really be yourself and be human in times like these, particularly. And I'm qualified as a human given psychosocial therapist, and I would say that the quality of your listening is absolutely crucial. And you know, it's understanding that you know, what are the essential emotional needs of human beings. You know, sometimes when you talk about emotional needs, people think you know, that people need to feel happy, or they need to, you know, to be at ease, or they have to get a certain level of calm. But actually the essential human emotional needs are quite specific, and Michelle started to mention some of those. You know, so it's we have a need for control over our lives. You know, this what's happening at the moment, where we're being, you know, sort of ordered one way and ordered another way, is completely robbing us of our own ability to get some control over our lives and to have any sort of autonomy. And I was just thinking yesterday, imagine if we'd had the kind of leadership that said right from the beginning, you know, we've got a crisis on our hands. We're going to, you know, listen to the scientists and do some, you know, early days setting of rules. But as this goes on, you know, we're going to develop your own ability to take care of yourselves. We're going to help you make decisions. We're going to devolve the responsibility down to the local levels where people know best what's really necessary for where you live. And have this kind of sense that this period was going to be one in which slowly we were going to develop trust in people, that they can trust themselves and be able to make the decisions that they need to. Imagine what kind of a place we'd be in now if that had happened. Instead, we're all confused, we're rebelling, you know, we're protesting, we're afraid. You know, you know, I hope there's nobody who's too supportive of this kind of leadership that we've had, but, you know, it's left us in quite a sorry state, I'm afraid to say. So having control is very important, and understanding that people need security and meaning and purpose all the time, but they need attention as well. You have to give people the attention they need in these moments of crisis. And who can give everybody that attention? It's not the leader themselves. It's really, they have to create the conditions in which we give each other attention. That's the thing, that's their responsibility. So yeah, it's an important question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Indra, and Georgina and Michelle as well. Like, really important responses there around, like you've said, authenticity, the need for collaboration, and then the need to create a kind of environment of trust and empowerment that you were touching on there at the end, Indra. And these, like you're all saying as well, this is becoming increasingly important at the moment in the kind of current crisis that we're facing.
Just one quickly to just something that Indra said around this control, and it's just I've got something right in front of me because I'm working on this looking at COVID.
Yeah, great.
And exploring what's worked in leadership and what are the lessons from it, but in a different. I don't want to create a new normal. I don't even like that phrase. And what you were saying about this control, I've got something here that just says the reason why these disruptions are so disorientating, demotivating, and distressing is that they illustrate how COVID-19 has attacked the foundations of what makes life meaningful to us. There are 3 dimensions of meaning in life that correspond to the categories of COVID-19: coherence, purpose, and significance. And therefore, the challenge or the opportunity is to explore how to enable leaders and individuals to reconstruct their sense of coherence, revisit and reinvest in their sense of purpose, and replenish and reinforce their sense of significance. And that, to me, is the real takeaway from this whole collective experience that we're going through, and the foundation for this new model of leadership.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. And I think that shows the the context that we're in, and how that's presenting these types of challenges and opportunities, if they can be kind of cared for in the right way by our leaders. But yeah, I mean, I'm curious. I'm curious what how you guys have seen, or whether you've seen like this done effectively in leadership during COVID. So we touched on the fact that there can be challenging ways that people can kind of not support a kind of atmosphere of trust. Have you been inspired by certain leaders or types of leadership during this time? Have you kind of looked at people, organizations, politicians, and thought, yes, actually, that's more of what we need to see?
Yeah, well, the obvious person is Jacinda Ardern, in who somebody said the other day has effectively become the most important politician on the planet, because she's been demonstrating how ways of leadership, styles of leadership, have a direct relationship to levels of infection and death. So if you can tell a story to the people who you are serving about what is going on, and help to include them in the responsibility for how to manage the crisis, you have a completely different outcome than when you just give random and often incoherent instructions to people. So at the beginning of the crisis, she quickly sat down and addressed the nation, and basically shared with the people that it was going to be a long, tough journey ahead, but that we were in it together and we were going to beat this thing. But she also did things like hold special press conferences for children, because she knew that children would be very anxious, not being able to go to school, and that their parents might not know exactly what to say to the kids. And so she led the way and showed the parents how to include the children in this national effort. And as a result of that, people were very willing to go with the strict rules, and willing to go with even surprising measures that she had to take. And as a result of that, they've had the lowest death and infection rate in the world. So when you see these two things directly correlated, it's quite shocking to think of how just a different style of leadership can lead to really direct outcomes.
And just on that example, it's really interesting to see there's been an election in New Zealand recently, and Jacinda Ardern and the Labour Party won by a much bigger majority than in decades. So clearly that her style and approach has really resonated with people a lot. So yeah, thank you for raising that example, Indra. Georgina and/or Michelle, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really standing out to me, and it's sorry, Michelle, you can go in just a moment. That's been really standing out to me, based on what Michelle and Indra have been speaking about, are two things. And I think it's permission. It's allowing permission to others to actually even be involved in some of the things which are really important to them. And I think a lot of the work that I've done is a lot of people don't recognize that they actually have permission to have a voice, to even be involved. And so if you can, in your leadership role, actually make it really obvious and say, I'm inviting you to be part of this, and I give you permission to let your voice be heard, so much comes out of it. It's actually transformational. So I've seen that. And then there's the second thing is value. So it's not just that, your voice can be heard, it's that I want to value what you have to say, that I believe that what you have to bring can add value to this situation, that you're not just a number, but actually that you're really important, and what you have to bring could revolutionize this situation. And so those two things I think are really important in those leadership positions that I've seen, that when they've been embedded, it just changes the whole culture of everything and invites that transformation to take place.
Thank you so much, Georgina. Really important points. And handing over to Michelle.
I think that's just, yeah, it just perfectly sums up. That's wonderful, Georgina. It's like resonates on so many levels with me. I think when you look also at Jacinda, because that's the obvious choice when you say, if you've seen a model of good leadership, say, boom, there she is, you know, and for so many reasons. And I think for me, one of her strengths is her vulnerability. Yeah, she shows herself as a human being, not a human doing. She is a human being, yeah, and you know, and just embodies compassion and humility. You know, she's there to serve, but it's this level of vulnerability and compassion, and actually, with you know, where there is vulnerability, there is true strength. And I think she's been accused previously of being weak, and not being, because she's empathetic. And I think, well, I think the joke's on you now, everybody that thought that, because look at what's happening, yeah. And I think it's really important for us as leaders to know that it's okay to be vulnerable. Yeah, I got asked a question at an event where it said, when do you feel at your most powerful? And I said, I feel at my most powerful when I'm in front of a room full of people that I don't know and speaking honestly. And anybody that's been to an event with me, Roger and Flo, I've helped to host events with Network Wellbeing and been honoured to be part of this, will know that I speak very openly and honestly. Yeah, I don't separate my personal from my professional. And I think it's that level of vulnerability that actually, when we don't have to hide parts of ourselves, it's okay just to be. And because, you know, the story is behind the story. And when Indra was saying about the storytelling, that it's so true, you know. We all have a story to tell, but there's always the story behind the story as well. And that vulnerability is woven throughout that. And just for leaders to know that it's okay. You don't have to be this big, strong person all the time. In fact, you'll probably disengage more people by being that way.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for bringing that vulnerability aspect in, Michelle. And I see in the chat box that Safi was saying, of course, that reminds of another brilliant female leader, Brené Brown, who's done a lot of amazing work on vulnerability. So I think we're now going to move towards breakout rooms, because we could continue this discussion all evening for sure, but we want to give you all a chance to connect with each other, hear each other's voices, and then when we come back, we'll aim to kind of bring your voices and your questions into the discussion with our three speakers some more. So we're going to go into breakout rooms for about 10 minutes or so, and I'm going to invite you to share on some specific questions, which I'll put in the chat box just now, but this is totally optional, as in we invite you to introduce yourself, that your name, where you're from, and then we've got a few questions that you can reflect on. What does inclusive and effective leadership look like to you? What type of leadership do you think best supports well-being? But also just kind of reflecting on what you've heard from the speakers, bringing in your own experience, and just using that space to kind of share ideas with each other. And just to say, we'll pause the recording during the breakout room, so feel free to kind of turn your video on if it's been off, to connect with the people in your room, and I'll give you a short warning when we're about to come back to the main room to kind of share in the wider discussion again. So you'll see, just give me one moment, and here we go. You'll see a box pop up that will invite you to go into the breakout room now, and yeah, you can accept that option, and we'll see you back here in 10 minutes or so. I hope you enjoy the discussions. In the main room. Welcome back those watching on the recording as well. So I hope that you enjoyed your breakout room discussions. I always feel it's hard to gauge how much time to give people in breakout rooms, because it can feel like so brilliant to open up about what you've just heard, and it can sometimes feel like you always want more time. But maybe thanks for your reaction on I'm sorry, pronouncing your name incorrectly, Oscar. Great. If anyone else wants to give a little reaction if they enjoyed their breakout room discussion, that's always lovely to see. Thanks, Rachel. A genuine thumbs up. Love it. Thank you all. So we're now going to move into the Q&A section of our event. So we loved hearing from our speakers and having a bit of discussion with them. We see that you've enjoyed kind of connecting with each other, and now we want to bring everyone back together and check in with you. So seeing if you have questions that you'd like to put to our speakers, and I know a few of you have written throughout the event, please do write in the chat box now, and I'm going to hand to my colleague Roger to share a few of the questions that have been shared throughout the event, but feel free to continue to post questions as we're speaking about the first questions. So Roger. Oh, you're muted, Roger.
Apologies for that, Flo. When I was needed, I wasn't there, was I? Couple of questions to start off with for Indra from Siobhan. Indra, you were talking about enabling storytelling and method of interaction with people, and she wondered how you did that in your own management and your own leadership roles within your organization. And secondly, Laura really appreciated and resonated with what you were saying about holding public space and leadership, and she wondered how this could shape the lives of ourselves and others. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yes, I think they might point at the same thing, which is that one of the things we do regularly is hold what we call collaboratories in towns and cities around the country. And a collaboratory is where we invite people from across the political divide to meet together, about 100 people at a time, and invite storytelling. This is exactly what we do. And we work very thoughtfully with facilitators, but also with artists, to create a really friendly and warm, convivial space for people to connect with each other, and then invite them into storytelling. And initially, the storytelling is around their own lives and how their lives are at this moment. But then we invite them to think about the future and share their dreams, actually, of what kind of a future they'd like to see. So all of this, when it's done in a process of storytelling, you get such rich and complex exchanges of information between people. The very opposite of what the old politics always tended to do was to look at issues and which side of the divide on this issue are you? Our way of sourcing a new politics or a new democracy is to invite people to tell their stories. And when you do that, you can see that the divides don't really appear, to be honest. People are very interested in each other as human beings.
Brilliant, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I really resonates with me, the idea of connection with people first rather than issues that do tend to sort of divide, and the way television companies and this sort of stuff tend to structure issues as arguments rather than ways of bringing people together. Vicky asked a really interesting question that Flo maybe even wants to answer, which is, how do you manage well-being when leading via Zoom? Flo, got any thoughts, or any of the others?
So I'm sure we can all speak to this, given that we've been thrown into a time when we meet much more on Zoom than in person at the moment, in the current context. So thank you, Vicky, for the lovely question. For me, I really like to do simple things like the grounding exercise we did when we arrived in the event. I think that really helps just to connect to the event that you're in and the intention that you have for being in that space. Yeah, I noticed that really helps me, and just being clear about your intention for being in a space helps you to kind of focus on being in that space itself. But yeah, I'd love to hear from others. Maybe I'm going to hand to Georgina, because I was just mentioning whilst others were in the breakout room that she's also been running some incredible Zoom events in the recent months.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that, Flo. Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, one of our values that we carry in Bud is that we have fun. So we make it really kind of light-hearted, even though we've talked about some very serious topics. We've just sort of said, you know, bring yourself and share as much or as little as you want, but we make sure that it's like a workshop type of event, so that there's a lot of participation. And again, that permission, we just say, look, get involved, you know, as much as we're just hosting this space to allow you to share and to be curious. So get stuck in. And there's many times I just completely step back and just let the participants kind of go with the flow, because sometimes my agenda is actually what's not required for that particular event, because something really interesting is coming about. So I guess it's about being flexible, and yeah, just allowing it to be fun and interesting, so that it doesn't feel like kind of work or this like really kind of heavy thing. You're just kind of relaxed, having more of a discussion, talking about things, and also allowing challenges to come forward that I think kind of spark the mind as well. But also just making sure you have those gaps. It's really, really important to have those gaps in between, and just like I've got to the point where I actually just completely switch off all technology and my phone and everything, so that I can just kind of calm my mind from being attached to anything whatsoever. And then I feel like really ready and prepared to go into the next meeting as well.
Yeah, that's so important. And thank you, Lydia, for sharing in the chat as well that before a meeting last week, you started with a positive intention meditation that went really well and made you more confident going into it. That's really I think it's really important, you know, as we've been talking about all evening about this kind of sense of collaboration and inclusiveness, to create that in the kind of spaces and events we have as well. I don't know, Michelle or Indra, whether you have anything you'd like to add on that.
In relation to the Zoom wellbeing, much like Lydia, I try to always just kind of get grounded before I get in there. I've been meditating for a long time, but you know, it doesn't have to be a massive meditation. Just, you know, even just a few minutes, just getting grounded. And also, I don't always have the camera on, and I'm just really open and honest about that, because we were having a conversation in the break when people were in breakout rooms, weren't we? And I was saying that, you know, with Zoom we get fatigued because we have to focus intensely on the other person's face to read what they're, you know, how they're responding to us, whereas in a room we don't have to do that. So sometimes I find it easier not to have the camera on as well. If I get a bit fatigued, I'll just say, look, actually I'm going to turn the camera off. I don't have to focus so intensely, and I can actually just listen. Other times I just won't have a Zoom. If it's an option, I'll quite often say to people, can we just have a chat on the phone? I'm just zoomed out. So I think it's just about feeling that it's okay if you don't feel okay, and like we were saying earlier, knowing to communicate that.
Yeah, and it's also, I guess, finding ways to be authentic, as to kind of bring it back to the points on leadership that we were discussing earlier, to find ways to be authentic in this new space, let's say. Just checking in with Indra before we move on to the next question.
I mean, I think at the beginning during this crisis, I was quite hesitant to spend a lot of time on the screen, and I was thinking, oh no, you know, have I lost my freedom and now I'm stuck in this square space, you know? And there was quite a lot of resistance. But as the time went on, it seemed to me that we were developing quite a new way of being human together, you know, and that it was something more than simply connecting on a screen, because it's quite intimate actually, and it's quite it's a new kind of connectivity that I'd never experienced before. And once I began to look at it that way, I started to get a bit more ambitious about it and try to help people have very meaningful experiences on Zoom. So just that, you know, never to allow it to go too long without going into a breakout room, for example, you know, give people enough attention so that they don't get into this thing that it's a flat space that isn't live, because actually when people are in contact on Zoom, they can achieve stuff that they couldn't achieve even sitting down in a room together. To be honest, some of the breakthroughs that I've experienced on Zoom have been more than what I've been able to achieve sitting down around a table. So this is a quite strange new space of exploration, and I think it'll be remembered historically for that, in fact.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Indra. And I do think, it's massive, some challenges and massive pros to being able to have this form of connection and it being possible, and kind of new ways of working coming from that. So I'm just thinking to kind of bring us back to the topic of leadership a bit more in our questions. So I had a question, and I do encourage you guys, if you've got further questions that you want to ask in the chat box, and just checking in briefly with Roger if you've got any more before I go into my questions.
No, you go for yours, Flo.
Great. Okay. I'll ask another question that I had from earlier that we didn't have time for. But yeah, like I say, if anyone else has questions you want to chip in the chat, that's very welcome. But we've talked a lot about the needs to bring more women into leadership positions, but I wonder how we can support women to get into those positions, and any advice each of you would give. So does anyone want to come in on that first?
Gosh, that's a big question, Flo. It's a massive help. I've kind of touched upon this in other work that I've done with girls, because it's quite systemic. If we really, you know, there are so many barriers and obstacles that women have had to and continue to need to overcome. And I think the sooner that we can start providing and reinforcing positive female role models for girls, the better. Yeah, it's a bit like an onion. You have less layers to peel away the earlier that we can start. So I think one, you know, a big answer is you know, education has a big part to play. Certainly in kind of bringing in her story instead of his story, and you know, and just doing lots of work around positive emotions with young people. So I think that's, you know, that's big. I think for us as individuals, I think we can all play a part. I think mentoring plays a huge part, has a huge impact. To have a positive female role model as a mentor, you know, if you can mentor another woman or another girl, I think that's a really powerful place to start from. Yeah, I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Michelle. And Georgina, would you like to come in next?
Yeah, thanks. And really just adding, because what you said is really powerful, Michelle. And I think just to add to that, it's a lot of the barriers, I believe, are more in our minds, because we're amazing as women. We can do so many great things, and it's recognizing and honoring our differences, and saying, actually, what I have to bring is just as important and can be even more powerful in many different ways. And I'm not afraid to own that and to step forward and bring that into a situation, or bring it to the table. So I think, again, that thing about permission is really important, but it always starts here, and having the freedom to even imagine that it's possible, I think, is key.
Yeah, thanks, Georgina. And Indra, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's very specific in the political sphere, because it's such a long, hard journey, and we're still not really succeeding in bringing parity in political life for women leaders. And for 2 or 3 years, I ran something called the Downing Street Project, in which we invited women to step up, and we you know, supported them to become leaders. But it was very hard to avoid the trap of even women themselves thinking that a good leader looks and behaves like a male leader. Very hard to do. So that didn't last long, actually, that project, because it wasn't having the impact that I was looking for, which was to change the nature and the culture of leadership itself. So now, in working with the alternative, I really encourage people to prize exactly those characteristics that they don't see in leadership today, and say what's missing from the space. And and very often the thing that they describe as missing is the very thing that a woman would be bringing. And so, but we always encourage women who are even thinking about leadership to sort of move almost like in a pack, move together. Don't feel that you have to stand by yourself when you're trying to make an impression or trying to change the culture of something. Have other women around you. And the key is, I think Georgina was sort of mentioning that too, that you have to invite women in. So many really great women leaders who could be, game changers, won't stand up until they're invited. But once they've been invited, they can really shine, right? And so, and I just want to make one final point, which is that there may be a whole new generation of women's leaders coming, because the women, the people that that I am literally following are people like Greta Thunberg, who is a young woman of that generation standing up and being counted with incredible, with courage and vulnerability and all the qualities, in fact, that Michelle and Georgina have been talking about.
Yeah.
And there's many like her.
Yeah, she's such another really inspiring figure. So thank you for bringing her in, and thank you for all you shared there, Indra. I'd actually like to just bring in one of our participants. Catherine had her hand up, and she's just going to share some examples from her context in relation to this question, just briefly. So Catherine.
Thank you. I've been in the community rail industry for 5 years. When I first started, it was very much a male-dominated, male of a certain age sort of industry that had aged out of the rail industry and into community rail. Women in community rail was set up to address the balance, because the behaviour from certain individuals wasn't appropriate. We had to put a code of conduct in that's been adopted by all the CRPs across the country, because they didn't think women could do that job, or they didn't think women had the right experience. And as a secondary of an offshoot of that, we're looking at bringing in young people to the STEM industries, because again, underrepresented, need to be invited, as it's been mentioned before. How are people to know what opportunities are there if we don't invite them to the table? So that was just a brief snapshot, and things have changed drastically in the last 4 years. A lot more women, younger people coming into the community rail industry and the rail industry itself. And that's quite often through working with year and industry students and apprentices as well. There's so many different ways we can engage the young people before they make firm decisions about where their futures lie. And again, it's just exposure to the opportunities.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you for sharing your experience. It's really interesting to hear how things have changed over time. Really appreciate you coming in there. And also interesting about the engagement of young people in different ways. You've mentioned there in STEM industries, Catherine. Indra mentioned about Greta Thunberg. I see Lisa is commenting in the chat about her daughter, who's 15, being part of the school strike for climate Leicester group. So yeah, really amazing to be inspired by your daughter, Lisa, in that role. So thank you so much for sharing that. So it's really powerful to close on hearing a voice from one of our participants, actually. So we're going to slowly draw to a close with hearing a final word from each of our speakers. But I just wanted to mention at this moment kind of following Catherine sharing, that one thing the Network of Wellbeing has been doing is co-hosting listening spaces with another organisation called the Heart Movement. So next Tuesday evening, we're going to be co-hosting a listening space on this topic of women, wellbeing and leadership. It's actually called Redefining Leadership, Women, Wellbeing and Power. And it's much more of an interactive space. So this evening we've had so much rich learning from Michelle, Georgina and Indra, and like some interaction through the breakout rooms and chat box, but in the listening space, that's to kind of complement this space to offer people a chance to share more of their own experiences. So you're very welcome to join us there. But like I say, before we share any more closing announcements, I'd just really like to offer the floor again to our three speakers to just reflect on any closing remarks you'd like to share, any takeaway message you'd like to leave the audience with from this evening's event. So I think we'll go in the same, maybe we'll go in the reverse order that we presented in. So we'll go to Indra first and then Georgina and then Michelle to close, if that's okay. So handing over to you, Indra.
Thanks very much. Yeah, so much has been said this evening, and thank you very much for your lovely facilitating, Flo. It's been a very warm and feminine space, I think, to hear from each other. My parting shot would be quite an ambitious one, really, because what I wanted to share with everyone was that in the 3 years that I've been doing the Alternative UK, I've slowly but surely come to the conclusion that bringing women to leadership is the game changer that we're all looking for. And it's not because women need to be as good or as anything as men, but because I find that when women move into leadership, they bring everyone with them. They don't leave the men behind. They bring everyone with them. So with the women will come diversity of all kinds, because they see the whole. They see the whole. To bring feminine leadership is to bring holistic leadership. So that would be my parting shot. And thanks so much for everything that I've learned tonight.
Thank you so much, Indra. Really powerful parting comments there. And over to you, Georgina.
Thank you. That was really inspiring, Indra, and it made me think. And actually, Mary, you've put it right in the chat box about the opportunities that we need to create more kind of diversity in our leadership is so important. But I guess in terms of what we've been speaking about tonight, I think the key thing for me is that we as women take ownership of who we are, and we really embrace the power that we have and recognize the change that we can bring and just step into it. That's my invitation to everyone tonight, is to just step into, you know, who you are and what you are able to do, and change the mindsets that some of us have had, and just recognize that actually we can and we will.
Thank you so much, Georgina. And Michelle?
Well, that's perfect for me to follow on, because I was just going to leave everyone with the question to take away and reflect upon, and just for you to ask yourself, what is the step that you are hesitating in taking? Yeah. What's the first step that you are afraid to take? Sit with it, reflect on it, and take the step.
Wow, what a brilliant invitation to end the discussion this evening. Thank you so much, Indra, Georgina and Michelle, for such powerful sharings this evening. Thank you so much to the audience for being with us. I'm just going to use the last 2 minutes or so to share very briefly about some other events that you can join. In fact, we've got another webinar coming up in about a month's time that I'll include on the chat box. But the details will be sent to you via follow-up email anyway, so you don't need to worry too much about it. And I know that Georgina has another event coming up, so feel free to pop that in the link in the chat box. Thank you, Georgina. And like I say, we'll include all the links to you in the follow-up email, so don't worry too much. But just a final request of the evening, we really love to connect with everyone afterwards on social media. So if it's okay, I would love to take a screenshot of the people here this evening. If you don't want to be included, feel free to turn your camera off. And if you're enthusiastic about being included, feel free to wave or do whatever feels right. Oh, and I love, yeah, great to see people turning their cameras on to be included. I love the enthusiasm. So I'll just do that now. Nice to see all your waving faces, beautiful. Thank you so much, and we'll share that on our Twitter page. So yeah, do connect with us on Twitter and come to future events. It's always lovely to see people coming back again, and really appreciated. So thanks so much once again to everyone, and wishing you all a wonderful rest of the evening.
Thank you, Flo. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Lovely to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.